Good afternoon and welcome into the Takeup. Today we have episode 179, What I Learned Teaching at the Expo. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into today's Takeup. Glad to see you back after a week off as I was out teaching at Impressions Expo Long Beach. If you guys didn't get to go, trust me, it was well worth the time spent. And as I said, and as I showed in the thumbnail, this is a time where I got to learn a lot too, because I got to team teach. And this time you can see there, I'll show you pictures of more stuff going on, but we've got myself and Justin Armenta and Joe Kramer. We were all up on stage team teaching the Technique Toolkit. So that was really cool. Got to go ahead and introduce those guys, kind of wrangle the show. And I brought those guys in because they absolutely had incredible information to give. Very happy I got to arrange that with the folks over at Impressions Expo, and incredibly happy with how it worked. So frankly, couldn't have asked for more from those guys. So before I say anything else, I want to say kudos to Justin and Joe for doing such a great job and having the content that people want, and certainly for putting up this great presentation. We had all three of our sessions going together on the day before the show, workshop style, and a lot of Q&A. And the great thing about it was, for those who were there, I just want to say so many of you were awesome. We're asking awesome questions. We're jumping in and getting involved. And I cannot thank you enough for everybody who attended both Technique Toolkit and later the session that I did the next morning about Embroidery RX, kind of diagnosing, digitizing problems. That session, which, by the way, another one, full to the brim. We had a larger room even than I had for Technique Toolkit. Technique Toolkit, we had a real full room, lots of people there for that whole day. Then next morning, I had a double room filled to the back. Luckily, that one got a video treatment too. So if you're somebody who was there, you can actually go and watch that one. You can get that from the folks at Impressions Expo. I know, haven't gotten to see it yet, but I know that they recorded that entire session as well. So that was really cool. But yeah, Technique Toolkit was awesome. And all of you guys who were there were just on point. I had so many questions then and after. So it was just such a cool time. It was such a really awesome way to kind of get to do this work, to be there with people, and especially to get to teach with two guys who had just incredible insights and really showed just some incredible work that I thought was both inspirational and informational. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get too far along, I am going to go ahead and grab everybody who's saying hi. You guys know that though you can watch this on, and here we go with the cringe, on the hashtag replay squad. You guys can come watch that. I'm glad for that. But if you are here live, you know that I'm going to say hi to you. If you're on replay squad, fast forward if you have to. Cindy came from Texas saying, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Cindy. And by the way, saw a lot of your comments while we were out there. Thank you for jumping in. Jab Embroidery. I remember you guys were out there and you've had great content you were posting as well. So glad to see you here. Scott from Sunrise Tactical Gear is here. Scott, awesome. Thank you for all your support. Everybody jumping in, talking to each other, which I love. And Christine, I wish we could have had you there too. Christine Shreve, just famously a wonderful contributor and writer. Sad you missed the ISS show. Would have been nice to see everybody. Would have been nice to see you too. I had to roll out a little early, admittedly, but great. Honestly, just great stuff. Great people there as well. And Martisan from Texas, Caffrey Creations. Thank you for you to be in here. And also, sorry, I got started reading ahead of myself. We have Justin in here. And by the way, Justin says, I had a blast. Great show. Great class of you and Joe Kramer. Justin, fantastic work from you, my friend. Strong work, as always. As we knew, though, right? I knew there was no way that you weren't going to produce strong work, but I was really happy to see you there. And I'm glad to sit on your class, too, my friend. I'll probably show some of your work here, too. So, by the way, I'm going to just go into this. If you don't know Justin, you should know Justin, and he is with JA Digitizing as well as the Embroidery Nerd. I'm going to go ahead and just say, big ups to all the stuff that he did. Incredible work. And I'm going to go ahead and share my second screen real quick, just so you can see some cool stuff from Justin. We are going to get into it further on, but I just want you to know that he was bringing the absolute technique. He was bringing the stuff that everybody wants, which in this case, the textured 3D foam, which is the incredible stuff that we have seen with these patterns and multiple layers and textures. I'm going to talk about some of the realities of it that Justin was awesome to share with us, but you can go and get textured 3D fonts from him. You can get all kinds of cool serpent style textured pieces, which is I would say is the more common version of some of this stuff that's done. Not that it's easy or that it's easy to make look as good as Justin's done, but you can go get stuff from JA Digitizing. And honestly, he's done so many cool textures, so many cool treatments on foam. And frankly, just wonderful stuff. As the digitizer, you look at the stuff and wish you had done it first because you see all these awesome developments. And we all take, we've all taken cues from people like Artist Stitch out there. We've taken cues from other folks, but he's doing incredible, cool work out here. So check out Justin's work. We're going to talk about it more, but I just want to show you some of those representative samples that you guys have seen out there. And of course, he's got his own webinars and awesome teaching opportunities out there that you should check out. But we're going to talk about more of that later. I just want to make sure everybody got a chance to see some of Justin's work since he's here talking and commenting. So thank you, Justin, for everything you put out there, and just awesome, like I said, awesome, strong work as always. Ron is here too. Thank you, Ron, for joining in. Good day from Milk River. Cheers. And yet facts. Yep. Those are good sessions all around. Identity Threads here saying hi. Thank you for being here. Frank from over in the UK. Frank, thank you for being here on multiple channels, my friend. And Joe Rita, thank you for showing up today. And Christine says, once again, I had some serious FOMO, kept seeing pictures from a number of friends here at the show. Looked like it was a great show. Absolutely. I didn't get to stay as long as I would want to due to some of the stuff you guys know who've been around the channel for a little bit. But what I did see was impressive, and the people I saw were incredible. And honestly, the attendees were so great. I mean, my gosh, the attendees were on the ball. There are different years, and I'm not trying to say that any attendees from previously, I'm not saying your year wasn't good. I've been out there for a while. But I'm going to say this year was very interesting. People were incredibly engaged, and I'm happy to see more and more people not only becoming engaged, but coming with really good, solid questions, with agendas, things they want to achieve when they get there, and with creative ideas. And that was the greatest thing. First thing I get in there, and I kind of was introducing the session that we did. As you guys know, the Technique Toolkit session, I went and introduced everybody, kind of got everything started. And one of the first things I said is like, look around you. In this room are your peers and the people you should be talking to. So what I want to stress here and now, just like I did then, is that one of the greatest resources from any trade show is the pool of decorators that will form around the trade show that are out there talking and enjoying each other and discussing these things. And the greatest thing was seeing people not only come up to us, ask questions, get involved with us, which was something we expect as educators, but getting involved with each other, explaining things to each other, talking about their experiences, and bringing a lot of that experience to each other in a way that was very open and honest. And the great thing is, though many of us come from an era from previous to the wide range of sharing that's common now. And don't get me wrong, in the era of influencers, there are axes to grind and there are irons in the fire that people have when they share information with you. We all know this. Whether it's likes, whether it's influence, whether it's promoting your own, packages, shows, tools, whatever. Yes, there are irons in the fire that many of us have. I still think this is a much more open and honest sharing of information that you're seeing in this era than the era I kind of came up in. I've told this story many times, but when I first started digitizing, one of the original digitizers that had been working for our shop, the shop that I first did in-house digitizing for, and she was a punch digitizer. So I'm talking about the kind of people who are working on the big boards, who are doing stitch by stitch. Truthfully, a craftsperson, an artist, somebody who's good. Don't get me wrong, very skilled. However, when she came by, she really kind of looked at my work and evaluated and scrutinized me and was not real happy about everything I was doing. And some of the people from that era, when I first came out and started teaching and writing and very openly discussing techniques, were not very happy with me. I mean, that is just the truth. But now I am seeing people who are really just joining this thing in the way that we would hope they would. They came together to talk, to share. This was not too much about competition. In fact, competition didn't seem to be on anybody's mind. We all understand that there's plenty enough of this pie to slice up, but people were absolutely jumping together, mixing together, coming away with new information that was more than the sum of the parts that were brought to the discussion, brought to the table. And that's what I'm hoping for all of this stuff. And something I've been really behind my entire career teaching is trying to get that, foster that as much as I can. And I got to say, Technique Toolkit, both in the fact that we had myself and Justin and Joe, which we have definitely different experiences, right? Justin and I are much closer together right now, but I've moved into some other spaces that maybe Justin isn't doing. He's absolutely entrenched in the production, but is also developing stock, like awesome, very technical and awesome stock designs and stock work too, something that I'm kind of been a little close to later. And then we've got Joe coming in with all of this retail development and use of different materials. And when all three of us got together, it was really pretty cool. So even just in the education, we had a through line, but we had different opinions and different things we came to the table with. But then to see that out in the audience as well, if I want to say an audience, I mean it was almost not an audience. Yes, people were sitting, watching, engaging, but then everybody came up and asked questions. People were very much talking amongst themselves and were coming up and discussing technique and getting in exactly what I had hoped, which is they got onto questions with all of us, questions with each of us separately, and we hung out there quite a while after our time was up. And that's exactly what I had hoped for. I mean, this is something from on the back end, and I'll be honest, at first we looked at how much time they gave us for the workshop and we were spacing things out going, man, I don't know, maybe they gave us a little too much time. We could have been there for 2 days. Really, it's awesome. But yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and give props to Joe, because I talked a lot about Justin. Joe Kramer came on and really talked about threads. And I'm going to talk about this more as I get through the show today. But Justin said this, and let me give this to Joe from Justin and I together. Justin says, Joe's info on different threads and techniques had my mind racing with new ideas. And I've got to say, even though I have dipped into the realm of threads that Joe comes from, nowhere near to his depth, nowhere near with the kind of, honestly, the abandon and creativity that he brought to it. So I felt the same. I'm like, man, I want to get out there. And I know this is going to sound funny, though we all sew. Like, we all stitch, we all embroider. Justin makes stuff all the time, both for production and himself. I make stuff fairly frequently, less frequently than he does, but for myself and for brilliance in testing and making new products, which hopefully, by the way, you'll see some new stuff from me soon. Though we embroider a lot, I think Justin will probably get with me on this and say, hey, it's a rare day when you've been in this for 20 plus years. You're coming up towards your 30-year mark, and someone gets you completely jazzed to hit the machines. Like, and honestly, Joe came to us with his materials and was just straight up ready to get us on board. And we were immediately like, man, I got to go work on some stuff. He's got some cool stuff on board that we want to see. And I wish I had more of his samples here, but off the top of my head, I just wanted to show you, I'm going to show you one image, just a quick texture image from one of his Facebook pieces. I didn't, unfortunately, get all of his sample stuff in hand before the session today. Unfortunately, I missed some of the stuff that I thought I had, I don't have. But just to show one little piece of it, just looking at him talking about texture and washed materials, and this is the big thing. He had Tech 77 thread here, and he's talking about the fill density. And the cool thing was, being in a group of people that was not only highly technical, but highly creative, it's the space where I love to be. And looking at, Joe's samples, just, it was an absolute wonderful time. And like I said, here we are standing there after the shows. And even after it let out, all three of us continued talking when everybody was gone. So it was really cool, awesome to see, and just incredible. Such a cool session. Really enjoyed it. And you can't, and also he had another session afterwards, Applique Embroidery Seekers, which people really loved. And I've got to say, Joe, hit it out of the park, as you might expect, right? So awesome stuff all the way around. Everybody was doing just the most to make everybody not only welcome. That's the other thing too. Everybody was welcome. We were all answering questions very equally. And I'm very proud to say, having kind of been part of a big part of kind of putting this thing together and making it work out with the Impressions team, I couldn't be more proud of how that turned out. So fantastic time. And really, these people are part of the tribe. So if you want to see more, I'm just going to say, please go out and find Justin. Like I said, JA Digitizing Studios. Go find JA Digitizing. He is out there doing the most, like I said, making it work. And so go check out Justin's stuff, jadigitizing.com. Yes, he does custom stuff as well. And we'll talk more, because I'm going to bring up his infamous bear design here in a minute, but awesome stock designs and stuff for him too. Go check it out. And if you want to see a little bit more from Joe, and yes, that is the attitude we expect from Mr. Joe Kramer. He is not only working with Amber, he also has a blog over here at appliquejoe.com, and he shows some really cool exercises and stuff. He's showing some stuff from Applique, and he has a great site that just discusses some things about like unconventional threads, stuff like that. And that is at appliquejoe.com. At the end of the day here, I will try and make sure I get those up in the links for you so you can see those or click on them directly. But go digitizing, appliquejoe.com. You know where I'm at, so don't worry. I'm going to tell you enough about what I'm doing. Go see those guys. And frankly, I just want to make sure they put a lot of great hard work into it, and I want to see them get out of it the attention they deserve. And that's what I feel. Anyway, suffice it to say, Session was great. Fantastic time there. And I wish I could have seen more of you there. And by the way, I'd love to see some of you guys here now. Hopefully we can teach that again. We haven't gotten to discuss if that's going to happen again at some point soon. Certainly Atlantic City won't be the same. Just going to say that now. Doesn't look like we're doing exactly the same stuff at Atlantic City. There might be something going on later. I'll fill you in. What I always say to you guys is until I have ink dry on the paper, I can't swear to anything, but I would love to teach with these two guys again if they want to teach with me. So we'll have to see what goes on later on. Let's do a couple more comments, and then we'll get into the things that I saw, the things that were causing buzz at the show, and hopefully we'll get to show you some more examples, and I'll discuss more about what we taught and what I learned during that Technique Toolkit session. So like I said, kind of a light show that's a little bit more about the experience that was had over there and getting us inspired. We'll get into some more technical stuff. Like I told you guys, we're also going to do some interviews, and Joe is slated to do an interview with me. We have to get that ironed out as far as what day we're going to do it. But we'll be seeing more interviews. We'll be seeing more people on the show, and certainly more technical stuff. So if any of this stuff is really interesting to you and you want to hear more about it here, whether from me or from someone else who's related, we'll see. I might also just break some of these things down and show you my version of some of the stuff you're seeing. If there's a technique you want to talk about, let me know. You're going to see more of that stuff from me as per the usual. But for right now, let's talk about the show and the people who are there. But let's just see. We got some folks who are still tuning in that I wanted to say hi to before we're all done. Certainly, by the way, yeah, Ron says very cool stuff, Justin. Absolutely. Stephanie from Caesar says, I wish I could have come. Yep, wish could have seen you there. It was awesome. Like Ramona said, it was an incredible event. Christine says, definitely much more honest and open now. People understand that making connections and learning from each other is vital. Yeah, 100%. It's a big deal. And honestly, I think people's success is predicated largely on being willing to learn and revisit the things that they learn. As I'm out there seeing this new wave of people coming in, not only are they looking for something different, I'm going to talk about that in a second, they're looking to produce different kinds of work, specialty work. And if all of us just lean back on what we know and lean back on our silos of information and don't mix and don't mingle and don't try new things, we'll be the sadder for it. Though I agree with Mike here. Some of the old school stuff could go 6-to-1 digitizing would be a great name for a digitizing venture. Absolutely. If you're somebody who is awesome and does hand punching, would be fantastic. Yeah, Ron says the era of them looking out for themselves and job security, the good old days. Yeah, the good old bad old days sometimes, but for real. And Christine says, well done to you, Eric, for creating this session. Lovely to see instructors working together and maybe getting introduced to new audience. It's absolutely. And that's another thing too. If you've got something awesome you want to share with the world, do it. Get out there, talk to the shows. They're always looking for people. Hey, talk to me, and talk to me if you're somebody on Atlantic City. I might be looking for more people to put on. But that's the thing. Those of us who have been in the business for a while, yes, there are people who want to protect their position. I know that exists in the world of education too, and especially out there in the world of like influencers and celebrities and all of that. Which, by the way, that word kind of choke on that one sometimes. However, most of us who've been out there and who are really about the craft and not about the rest of the trappings, we're out there to get good people and good information out and up. And we want to lift everybody up who's going. And honestly, something I've said a million times, every time somebody says, oh, don't you worry about some new person coming around and taking your spot. And I'm like, eventually I should hope so. The beard's going to get grayer. I'm going to get older. And someday I'm not going to want to do this forever. I'm sure hoping the next person's better than me, or all this teaching wasn't worth the whole lot, was it? Anyway, last one from Christine here. Last couple. She said, you're going to do interviews that ever happened on the Takeup? No, I haven't done interviews on the Takeup, but you guys should look forward to the needle break. Definitely going to do a thing. So we're going to have to do that. And Christine says, definitely agree with this. I encourage women to put forward suggestions of sessions they can teach trade shows. Absolutely. Please. By all means, people are looking for more input. If you are willing to do it, here's the other thing, though, I'm going to be honest. If you think you're going to run into the trade shows to teach and make a boatload of money, and my other educators are already giggling right now, make a boatload of money, have amazing influences, be given a bunch of free stuff, that's not going to happen. You got to do this because you love it. You have to know what you're talking about to do it. And you have to put yourself out there and do that work partially ahead of time. You have to kind of make the first proof by putting work out there in the world. That's just the honest truth of how this thing works. People trust you because they know you can do the work. If you are already sharing, that's the thing. The people who are putting people on, find you already in the process of sharing, teaching, and being the best version of yourself you can in the industry, being an ambassador for the industry, and then move you into these positions. They don't wait for you to put your first effort out and then put you on, and you're holding back and waiting and keeping to yourself. You have to put some of those resources out there yourself, and the education has to come from the heart, because truthfully, the education by itself is no way to make this thing, frankly, even break even most of the time. It's a labor of love. So hence why I'm out here, like, calling up and making sure that Justin and Joe and anybody who's teaching. I mean, we had lots of lovely people out there teaching. Why do I always call those folks out and talk about their stuff that they're working on, share their names, share their sites? Because the truth of the matter is, it's a labor of love. We put out the effort because we want people to learn, and we want the industry to be healthy and to be good stewards and good ambassadors. It's not in the name of, making a ton of money, or, and certainly not directly from being paid to present. That's not something that's going to make you a ton of money. It's not a slight toward the people who are organizing the shows. I'm just saying, I've had a couple of people who have come to me with this, the theme, especially back in a couple of the last Impressions Expo, where I was teaching like 6 classes, and they were like, "Oh man, you're just out there raking it in." And I had to definitely shake my head on that one. I'm like, no, guys, that is not how it is. You got to love what you do. And if you are somebody who wants to get out there and educate, you have to love giving other people a shot, and you have to love uplifting your fellow decorators. Otherwise, you're not going to go very far with this thing. And honestly, you won't want to. People who are doing it for other reasons, yes, they're great. There's great perks. There's great, lovely things. There's doors that are open to you for sure, for doing the work, but it's not going to be something where you're just going to get massive remuneration for being out there. Frankly, if you're going to do that, do the work, do the decoration, keep selling, keep the needles moving. And that's a fine thing to do. If you want to teach, you got to do it because you love it. But let's talk about the cool stuff, right? Let's talk about the stuff we're actually going at. Let's get to the actual topics. I want to make sure we just kind of review. Like I said, Technique Toolkit went off. It was great. Loved it. Joe and Justin and I had a good old time. Talked about breaking the rules, elevated 3D foam, and especially stitching on my side. However, the stuff that I remember, and the first things I'll say is the champion of all trade shows, the winning thing that is always there. What is the first thing that I notice is that everybody has shiny object syndrome. When I say that, that just means that everybody is out there looking at equipment and getting very excited about equipment. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, what I love is I've seen a lot more people who are out there doing videos. There's a guy on YouTube. I'm going to show you just a screenshot of his video. So Rye Beats was out there. There was a couple different people where I've seen videos coming in where I've gotten some notifications from people saying, "Hey, I saw this video. What did you think about whatever?" And this is the one thing I'm going to talk about really quickly. The machine that was on everybody's mind, or at least who kept on asking me about it, was in the ZSK booth, and or with the people at ZSK, not in the ZSK booth, but with the people at ZSK. And this guy, Rye Beats, was one of the ones who had a video that shows it. So I'm just going to bring this up so you can see what's going on with this one. But fast machines, new machines, shiny machines. That is what was going on. And this one is the one of the new series from the R series that's out there from ZSK. I heard about this machine over and over from everybody. Love ZSK machines. You guys know I do. I've got the picture of the one in the back here, but this was the one I kept seeing, and it kind of brought up a lot of debates. I'll play just a little tiny bit of it running. 18 needle machine, and this is the one that everybody's heard is running crazy at 2,000 stitches a minute. Well, this fellow here, Rye Beats, was on the floor. And like I said, I'll try and link some of this stuff later on into the notes if I can get all that put up. But you'll see that's that new R series machine. And so thank you to Rye Beats, who is over there, so over on YouTube, talking about that stuff. This machine was one that was being talked about a lot. And frankly, of the embroidery world right now, that was the thing that I heard the most. And here was the interesting thing. Yes, the ZSK R series machine, that was absolutely on everybody's tongue when I was out there. The funny thing, I didn't hear as much gossip about color reel was the other thing I was kind of surprised. So of the embroidery things that I noticed really kind of off the bat is that everybody was talking about these machines because they were talking about how fast they were more than anything. They have a different look to them, and they're very fast and run very smooth. The ZSKs do run very smooth, but I was hearing about them fairly consistently. And the other thing I heard a lot about, honestly, because I heard about a lot of specialty embroidery, more people were also talking about the latest Tajima machines. And I know for the last couple of years, we've now had last year, we had the digital presser foot that adjusts presser foot height. I was hearing about that a lot. So the two things I heard about were fast machines and doing specialty work and adjustable presser feet. Like I was hearing that over and over and over again. Now, not everybody felt the same way about that stuff, but absolutely there was a lot going on in that same kind of space, right? So people were very much talking about those machine capabilities. But the thing that I'm going to bring out about that, or kind of explain about that, was that it was all about capability, right? So when we're talking about like the ZSKR series machines, what they're talking about is how fast it was, but they were also talking about the other ZSK machines, the classic blue machines, because I was hearing about multiple people who want to do attachments. And in fact, I'm seeing in the comments here too, Bar was already saying, I want the sequin attachment for my machine. I was surprised how many people were looking for specialty machines, whether it was a specialty machine entirely, because chenille, I heard chenille more often than I've heard it recently. Not saying that necessarily there's been a massive flowering of chenille. I don't think I've seen that in sales, but I'm seeing more people who want chain stitch and proper chenille, which is also interesting to those of us like myself who were talking about specialty stitching techniques, because a lot of what we do is mock the textures of other types of stitching or handcraft or needlework in machine embroidery. That was something I talked about as part of my session, but a lot of people were talking about sequins. Cording was the other one. Sequins, cording, chenille, also various hoops and attachments, but all of it was in service of what I would consider specialty embroidery as far as the execution. Certainly, one of the questions that did come up when we were talking about the R series, though, was the speed. We were talking about the 2,000 stitch per minute border that they're talking about. And the big question we ended up with was, is faster better? And this was a very tough question to answer for people. A lot of people wanted to come and say, are you ever going to run at 2,000? And I'd say, I don't think a lot of the stuff that we were seeing out there is going to run that way. Why? Not necessarily that you can't run standard embroidery very fast, especially you're on stable materials with the right type of thread. Everything's adjusted. You can run quite quickly, certainly. And if you've adjusted your file, because there are some adjustments you can do to things like there's going to be increased pull tension or increased pull compensation we're going to need to handle excess speed because the fabric and the thread has to relax and it's going to lash. But the thing is, that stuff, you can adjust for it to some degree. Yes, can you run very fast? But there are so many people who are asking me about specialty textures, 3D foam, adding materials, multimedia, sequins, and the like, that I'm like, oh boy, we start getting into using thick threads, wool blend threads. We get into doing specialty textures on foam. We get into doing different applique materials, and running 2,000 stitches a minute is probably not going to happen. Or when people were talking a lot about running on t-shirts and thin materials, I talked to several people about running on tulle and bridal. So we're talking about like light materials, diaphanous material where we're going to use water soluble stabilizers. 2,000 stitches a minute probably is not going to be for everything. So super, super light materials, super stretchy materials, trying to run with less stabilizer, that stuff. I'm like, man, I think there is a limit to how much fabric can relax, how much thread can relax at speed. And it's something Joe actually said too. We were talking with Joe about all the specialty threads, things like that. Absolutely a different kind of thing. We do have to worry about that a little bit and say, hey, it's something you want to, it's something that you want to look at as a possibility. I think people who are trying to do mass production will also understand that if you have any problems with your thread, any problems with needles, any problems with your material having maybe seams that are difficult, running full tilt hell bent for leather may not be the best thing you can do. Or at the very least, you'll be balancing it. So it's cool that it's in the realm of possibility. It's also cool that the machine's running at such tolerances that it will tolerate doing that, even with everything kind of aligned and in a wonderful way. I don't think you're going to run 2K all the time. I just don't think so. Plus, I'm going to say the other thing that is not very nice. This is the not nice way to put this. I'll try and put it in a nicer way. The more realistic way to put this sometimes is that I know lots of shops for whom they don't really have enough work, nor is there a call for the work to be immediately done in such a way that having 2K stitches a minute is the biggest problem that they have. If you're not filling your production time on your existing machine, getting a faster machine because you really don't want to sit next to it or have to wait for it to run, I don't know. The concept of faster to me just means more production. If I'm not filling up the production and if a customer's not waiting on it, I'm not as concerned. What I think you could do with this kind of thing, which would be awesome, if you had a very stable kind of material, if you had the right kind of thread, let's say you have this and you're doing customization, like let's say we're doing um, stitch while you wait name drops and base customization on garments that'll hold up to it. This would be awesome for a kiosk. Awesome for a kiosk. That's where I would want to put that. There's a lot of things where I think of the specialty way I would handle that. And if you were dropping large names on denim jackets or something, like I've seen a couple of these done for fashion setups or for in store or standard kind of decorative pieces that are in a few colors, so you can have a nice range of colors and maybe even thread sizes depending on what you're doing. Set up on those 18 needles. People can select from their colors, drop a name, throw a standard logo somewhere on a piece. That would be really cool. Something that was really stable, I can see doing it for a lot of that stuff just rolling. But yeah, there's some of those times where you have problems with that. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Like Justin said, if someone comes in at 3:30, needs it by 4, awesome. I sure hope they don't want it on a stretchy, moisture wicking poly sports shirt, because I don't think we're going to roll like that. Kind of like Ron said, run 2000 on a beanie. Even with the best metallic thread, I don't think you're run 2000. Yeah, like I said, it really depends on what you're going to work on. Maybe patches, I know, but even patches will pull. I mean, even twill will pull if you roll at it hard enough. So it just depends. And like Mike says, I don't need a machine having a non-stopping, for example, shred rather than break, thread break, getting ahead of me at 2000 SPM. Yeah, if you had the dreaded caterpillar where the thread shreds and makes the woolly booger on the front of your machine but doesn't fully break and doesn't trigger the sensors, that'd be a heck of a thing. But like I said, I'm coming from an experience of an older machine guy, right? That's the thing. Even with me, I have a time where you look at the image behind me, we've got the standard old school tension dials, and I still sometimes I look at the machines that have automatic tensioning of one type or another, and there's a little bit of I can feel myself withdrawing a little bit because I like to be able to twiddle the knobs. I know how those work, but I can see people coming into this now who want more assistance, like Tajima's magnetic tensioning system, or even like the Active Feet from Melco, which I've never been a super fan of, but that's mostly because the early versions of it caused people so much trouble that I still hesitate on the way that they feed the thread. But I have to admit to myself that that's a bias that comes from me running for years on machines that look like these. So I'd still like to hear it and look at it. But yeah, like I said, when we're talking about embroidery, for me, the one that kept standing out and that I heard the most back from. So a lot of this is more me listening to people polling, asking me, what do I think about stuff? The big shiny object for them was the ZSKR series. Absolutely. Were they looking at everything else? Yeah. I mean, there were new brands on the floor, or at least brands I hadn't heard of, some new imports that people were bringing in. And I saw that, and some that have been around for a while, like Hollyama was on the floor, which I hadn't seen them do a booth quite like that before. We did see, we've talked about lots of other brands. Buy, which has been kind of making waves as a very inexpensive, low bar to entry Chinese import machine that's coming into the port cities. I've seen a lot of people buying machines. I'm not going to swear by them because I still feel like people are having kind of very mixed results, as many of the import machines may have, who are in that kind of class. At the same time, I'm seeing more of them and more people excited to see them. People were looking for embroidery in a way. Also, by the way, more printers in my classes. More printers showing up in my classes to be part of the embroidery world. So embroidery kind of really not, I wouldn't say making a comeback. It never has gone away. But at the same time, it was just seeing lots of people who are very open. And like I said, just like I talked about, people sharing more now than they used to, lots of cross pollination between the world of print and embroidery in a way that wasn't snarky, in a way that wasn't the print guys calling us all doily making grandmas, which by the way, I love doily making grandmas. So don't don't take that the wrong way, especially not for me. I love lace work. Um, and or us looking at the print guys and saying it's a bunch of guys who had bands who were making merch for themselves who then graduated into a job with print. Those are the jokes we used to slay around at each other back in my old shop. We used to say a lot of that stuff to each other. I was in a mixed media shop, guys. I've made films for printing many a time in the art room. But it was cool to see a real cross pollination of people just enjoying all the things that was done best by whatever medium they're talking about. Like I said, specialty treatments, especially textures, not just in the embroidery world. I am going to talk more about that, but I saw a ton of dimensional press-on treatments. So just like the stuff, Stalls is the biggest company that I see talking about this stuff, the flex stuff, the badges that have molding or that have flock on them. Tons of dimensional badges and heat press were going on. So dimensional treatments and specialty textures all over the place. Tons of DTF. And I don't even think I need to show you videos of DTF or images of DTF. All you have to know is that it means direct to film. So we're talking about printing to film and then heat transferring from it. So it's very much like DTG. So there's direct to garment, which is where we are using essentially a very souped up inkjet printer to create full color transfers for print and heat pressing them on. There was so much churn, so much DTF going on. And I think that's something that we're going to see a lot of. In fact, we had a good comment here, and I'm going to bring this up. Barb says, what are your thoughts on the DTF that looks like embroidery using AI in Photoshop? I kind of like the look. I'm going to say, honestly, the problem I have with it is that the AI version of embroidery just doesn't look like embroidery to me. Here's where I'm going to kind of shock some people. Despite the fact that I'm an embroidery purist and the fact that I do still, even in making these kind of things, I tend to use embroidery tools to make them because I have an entire episode on how to make faux embroidery treatments for print. Go back and check it out. You want to see how I do faux embroidery treatments for print? Go look it up. I actually start from an embroidery file to do it, but I've made tons of faux embroidery for people. However, I don't love the AI versions of it because of the look. The thing is, I'm not the audience. And here's where we have an issue. For the average human who doesn't know embroidery from a hole in the ground, who is not steeped in thread, yeah, you're not picking thread out of your hair or off of your pillow at night the way us embroiderers are. The average human does not necessarily see that. They see a thread-like texture on an image and they're pretty happy with it. I have a hard time saying that there isn't a place for it. There's surely a place for it, but just like a lot of things with AI, the craftsmanship may not be there. The control most certainly isn't there. It doesn't mean there's not a place for it. It means for me that it is, I still consider it a lesser version than any sort of design done by designers. The AI that's out there has gotten better and better. I've used quite a few of them. I've used Midjourney and a few different others. Midjourney the most, Dolly, several others I have tried, and I don't need to go naming like a million names of the little pieces and of stable diffusion pieces and things that I've messed with. They are getting better at creating embroidery like textures. They don't really look like embroidery, but to an untrained eye, they probably do. And certainly they look a little bit better than what we used to see, which is people who are just filling a vector shape with a rough fabric-like texture and calling it embroidery. I think the techniques are good for low run people who don't have the budget for a ton of art. We can make that happen. The thing to remember for all of us is, yes, we can create something that is of a higher level. I think we still should. I think it is worthwhile. Like I said, I did an entire episode on creating faux print treatments with embroidery and with embroidery software, and honestly combining that with vector and with raster decoration software or design software. I think we can make something that's more elevated, but we also have to remember that we are not the end audience. The end audience is probably full of people who don't know embroidery from a hole in the ground, who are not looking at stitch directions and angles, who are not thinking about how some stitching just doesn't line up. For those folks, if you could feed their high school mascot into a piece and then come up with a DTF decoration, or make something that is similar for that, or sublimate an embroidered looking version of it on 5 shirts, and you could do it in a half hour, you're going to win that client. And that's really what I think it is. It's hard for us to remember that despite the fact that we are aspiring to a level of craftsmanship, that we want mastery over our craft, that the end user, the end viewer of the apparel isn't us, is not in set, full of industry specialists, that group of people that is that final audience. They are not, as I always say, indoctrinated into the arcane side of what embroidery is. You and I, we're going to talk about embroidery in a way that they will never understand, and that's totally acceptable. And we as experts can make them a sublime piece that goes beyond that. However, if you are somebody who is absolutely not initiated to it, who needs to have, our whatever, our Farmington Wildcats logo on 5 pieces, and I want it to kind of look like embroidery, but I can't pay for it, and I need these t-shirts for the game tonight for the coaches. AI treatment or AI style replacements on top of an existing piece of logo art with a little bit of tweaking might just fit the bill. And if you're somebody who's got DTG, DTF in-house, sublimation in-house, it might just be the right call for you to get that order out the door. Do those hard goods, get that tumbler made. If you have their existing embroidery file, though, there are better options. And honestly, if you have the existing embroidery file, go back and watch that episode where I talk about that stuff, and you will be able to see exactly how to take that embroidery file and make something printable out of it that looks pretty cool. So that's my attitude toward that. I mean, I know that's kind of an aside, but considering how huge DTF was at the show, I think that's totally a good aside. For real. I think it's a worthwhile aside to have. Good options, right? And so, yeah, Jab, you're saying techniques seem perfect for the clients who mentioned cost. Yeah, for sure. It's something that you have to do sometimes. Showstopper says, I do all 3, but really love embroidery. Me too. I think embroidery is it's the king, right? It takes the crown. Embroidery is the luxury item. I still push embroidery wherever I can because I still do. I absolutely think durability, luxuriousness, texture, embroidery is the one for me. But hey, I'm also not a printer. I'm not a printer in my heart. I've done a ton of sublimation on my own. Heck, I've pressed quite a few pieces myself. Definitely not as much as like my good friend Aaron Montgomery. He's done quite a lot more and certainly could teach you a lot more. But certainly, I think sublimation's awesome, print's awesome. I've done work for all of them, but I just can't get over how much embroidery brings to the table. But yeah, Barb says the average person doesn't know the difference or an issue in embroidery. I'll check out the video, please. It's worthwhile just to think about converting your existing designs and making them into something that works for embroidery. I think it's something that works for faux embroidery prints. It's a cool way to convert some existing assets. And if you're doing digital print of any kind, it does give you one more way to access these clients. And like I said, even if you're not thinking about doing it on garments where you would rather do embroidery, hey, cool. Use it for hard goods, coasters, tumblers, mugs, all of the rest of that stuff. And you can do sublimation printing on that or order DTF transfers for stuff. And it can be an excellent way to go with other things you would never be able to embroider. And yeah, good way to give options. Also, I also push embroider first. Absolutely. Always. If you're embroidery in your heart, it's hard not to. And then Ramona says, and this is also something I'll get more into our class here in a second to kind of round this all up. Until Joe's presentation, I never considered putting full front embroidery on a t-shirt. I've done full front embroidery on a t-shirt multiple times. I will say this though. The way he does it, the things that he does, you really have to have a customer that's on board, not because the look is so wild, which I mean, some of the looks are very wild. And like I said, I when I get Joe on, because he's going to be an interview, the needle break is coming up. The new interviews portion of this thing is coming up and Joe's going to be on it. We'll show more of his samples. But the thing is, a lot of his stuff requires specialty stabilizers, requires a pretty decent stitch count, and often even requires washing or someone to be very tolerant of washing out like wash away stabilizers. Not all corporate customers or business customers can go along for the ride. I did a lot of stuff where I wanted to do washing, and only a very few of my clients over the time doing vastly business to business work, which is really where I come from. I come from the logo workplace. It's certainly a lot of other stuff and bands and organizations and movie stuff and all that stuff. I've done a lot, but the vast amount of stuff that I've done is corporate, and the corporate clients, when you take the finish off a garment, that can be hard. I will say though, Joe's usage of threads, Joe's usage of designs, just really fantastic. And our says, does Joe have a YouTube channel? He does. He's doing stuff with Amber Creative right now. Most of his stuff is a little shorter and probably doesn't dive quite this far in, but he does teach more stuff there. What I would say is, I'm going to go ahead and bring his stuff up because he has some good blogs over here to look at. And I'm actually going to pop one up on screen for you. He's got this thing about the realities of unconventional thread here. And hopefully I can get that to pop up for you. I'm having some slowdowns. AppliqueJoe.com. You can contact him there as well. So let's go ahead, and this is appliquejoe.com. I'm going to go ahead and pop up a link in the chat. So if you're in the comments right now, you'll get the link. That's one of his blogs where he talks about pushing the boundaries of thread and using different kinds of thread and tips and tricks. He doesn't have quite the same depth as he had in the classes here. The classes, he really got into settings and needles and everything else. But yeah, absolutely. It's like I always said, people are always like surprised that I'm putting people's links up or trying to send you to everybody else too. The content is good. When the content is good, we all do good things. Plus, if you think that I'm not going to show you some cool stuff made with those the kinds of fuzzy, thicker, different threads, you're wrong. Plus, I've showed you some of that stuff before. If you guys have seen some of my Viking Age stuff, you might not even remember that I used some of that thread. I would tell you guys I had a spun poly thread or a spun polycore thread that's a little bit fuzzy. I actually am doing something very similar to Joe in that. So you've seen some of my pieces that have that fuzz to them. Some of them are done with embroidery thread that's made for it, like Burmalana from Madeira, which is a wool blend thread, a 12 weight, very thick thread. And some of them are done with serger and sewing thread that has a little fuzz to it because it runs just fine. And that was the thing from Joe as well. But let's go to the last few things I wanted to mention too, because we had some stuff that was interesting. Like I said, the DTF pre-made decorations were everywhere. I showed you the machines that everybody was looking at. There's quite a lot more that was going on. Certainly, you can go to Impressions channel, has some good stuff. And like we said earlier, Rybeats has some good videos. So that's RHYBEATS on YouTube. He had some good videos just walking the floor. If you just want to get a feeling for it, and I'll go ahead and give this day 2 video that I showed you guys. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in the comments for you as well. That was one of the Rybeats videos. He's just got some good stuff of him walking the floor. There's tons of people who did floor walks for Impressions Expo. I just saw his and was like, man, that he kind of got the feeling for me of what it's like to walk the floor. And I didn't have a chance to really take a lot of video of that this time around. But check those out. I don't know enough about the rest of his channel to tell you if the rest of his content's good, but those were good floor walks. And I would just go ahead and recommend that if you just want to get a feeling for it, check it out because there was a lot going on there. But what I'm going to say was interesting. Once again, before I get into the stuff that I learned from our session, the last couple of things I want to say about the people who were at our sessions and who talked to me and who came up and also emailed me after the fact and got me on social, DM'd me after the fact are these things. Number one, absolutely the basics are evergreen. Everybody wants to review the basics. I had people asking me the same things that we always hear, which are how to control pull and push compensation, how to handle density and what it really means, how to get less rippling on thin materials or materials that are very flexible or stretchy, how to handle small details. These things are common and evergreen and keep coming back. So there's nothing wrong with that. We're going to teach more classes like that. You'll probably see videos of mine that repeat 3-4 times over the career of that I have had on the Takeup, just let alone the many years I've been teaching on the road and having been writing for the industry since 2006, which by the way, makes me feel a little bit more gray than I look even. Suffice it to say, these basics are evergreen. They keep coming back and people are always starting in, but that also means there's new people joining us all the time and new blood is good for us. It keeps us healthy, keeps us thinking about new things. The next thing is specialties are here. If you had not seen people doing specialty work before, and I mean anything that's just not what we expect. When I talk about standard embroidery, and in fact, I talked about that in my session, and I'll go ahead and bring up my session to talk about this really quickly. My entire session was about captivating people with specialty stitching. When I said specialty stitching, it means a lot of different things to different people. But I'll go ahead and put this in presentation mode so you can see it. I'm not going to go through my entire presentation, but one of the things I did go through is talking about what standard embroidery is. And when I talk about that here, this stuff is specialty. It's a lot of my stuff you may have seen before. We got different treatments. We have me making faux knits. You have the pixel stitching. You got envelope text, which takes specialty tools and might not be the same for all the softwares. You guys know that stuff's all made in Stitch Artist. We've got the textures like we had from Justin, but I was also showing a little bit about how I do textures on foam when I want to do them, and specialty threads. All this stuff is specialty stitching. But a lot of what we do, and I'm just going to zip right through, and yep, you guys just got, if you can slow down, you can see a lot of stuff. Specialty is not a style, but it means not standard. And this is what I kind of had to define for people. This is the kind of machine embroidery when I came up that a lot of embroidery was. It was logo machine embroidery. There's nothing wrong with it. Our company made a ton of money over the years on TLC plumbing's natural standard embroidery. It is a left chest logo. It's fill stitches with some satin borders. It sometimes has some straight stitch detail in it. It's 4 inches wide. It's 2 to 3 inches tall. It goes over a pocket, and there's nothing wrong with it. The thing I'm going to say is, though this is always the undercurrent of embroidery, this business to business standard look at embroidery is always the undercurrent. At the show this time around, I had more people asking about crazy materials, working on different gauges of leather and plastics, people who are doing specialty treatments, people who are doing lace work, people who wanted to make patches out of materials that are not standard. Also, just different design categories using different kinds of textures, specialty work, different threads, different textures. Like I said, even to the point of more people wanting a chenille machine. I know Mike had said earlier he wants to go with a real chenille machine. I would love to play with one myself. Like I said, any sponsors want to just drop those off and unlock them fully, I am happy to see. But at the same time, it's something that you didn't really do. In my original time with kind of machine embroidery, a lot of what we did is this. It's standard logos, it's left chest logos, it's logo types on everything the same, it's common stitch types and styles, it's poly thread, it's standard placements, it's pretty uniform, flat fill, satin borders, run stitch detail. That was a lot of what we did. And I'll go ahead and let you in on a little joke from the piece. Coloring book digitizing, stuff with big borders that had big flat fills. That's a lot of what we talked about. And I think that stuff is still there. The thing is, more and more people now, like I said, I'm not gonna go through all my slides, but more and more people want something a little different. They want something that has some texture. They want something using some new materials, and they were in different markets. So a portion of this is that people were in specialty markets serving clients that were doing something interesting. They were doing swimwear and waterproof stuff. They were doing, you know, they were doing different kinds of materials. They were doing bridal, which has been around forever, but is still, I would consider, especially embroidery. They were doing home decor. More of those people were at this show asking questions and talking about cool stuff. So yeah, new textures, new stuff. And that's the thing. Though we all know that production is production, we want to keep things running. In fact, I think Cindy just said something to that effect. All the one use different fabrics and textures. Production is what what's making the money in most shops. Yes, I'll say that. However, there is this place for what I call long tail decoration, what we call the long tail. If you guys are aware of kind of the standard distribution, when you look at any sort of metric, like most people on a bell curve, we have a bell curve in front of us, right? And I'll try and do it backward for you. We have the bell curve for it, where there's a long kind of ramp up, then we have a nice big bell shape in the middle that goes on the other side. When we try and graph a lot of tendencies with people, there's a lot of people right in the middle. There's a fall off to both sides, and then on both ends of whatever spectrum that we're talking about, there tends to be this long tail of these little specialty numbers, right? So in the world of embroidery, right, dead in the center is probably uniforming left chest cap fronts, polyester thread, standard logos, standard embroidery is right in that middle. The most of the work is there. But there's people who want to purchase things out here on the tail. And the cool thing about being out here on the tail is that some of those people, because they're not being served, really will spend more money per unit, more money per stitch, more money per object that you're selling them than the people who are here. This, because everybody wants it and everybody's producing it right in the middle of the bell curve, that's where people are also in the commodity zone. What do I mean by that? Everybody's making it. Everybody knows how to make it. It is the standard. Everything's geared toward it. All the tools are made to make this stuff. That's where most of that stuff is going on. Anyone who has an embroidery machine and a little bit of wherewithal can make that TLC logo that I just showed you. I'll tell you, like we talked about before, if you saw my episode on fonts, what did I do to make that a little different? I digitized custom fonts for that other side of the garment so that we had the custom font that matched their branding. Why was that important? Because then nobody else had the font that matched their branding because I made it custom and it wasn't something that came with your software. And that meant that I had anything that was a unique value proposition in this world of commodity embroidery where they can go to anyone to get that work done. Whereas if you go out to that long tail way out here in the boondocks where there are only a few people who are doing certain kinds of work, I'm doing a restoration of 1920s regalia. I am doing work that is out on the tail. If you're very good at it, yes, there are a few people who are doing it, but every unit is worth more, very likely has a higher value proposition. And I saw lots of long tail decorators out there. And where this is niche market decorators, people who are decorating specifically for a particular kind of clientele or for a particular kind of work that was specialty and not going to be found by everybody, not going to be known by everybody who's in the embroidery business. So I'm not saying that is just necessarily, that's not your ticket to ride, that everything's going to be perfect. I'll say, in fact, for me, that just like the basics of education are evergreen, the basics of embroidery are evergreen. You're going to find somebody who wants a work shirt or a polo shirt or a six panel hat with a standard logo on it all day till the end of time. Like, I think we will probably want that unless we start getting into the silver jumpsuits that all the old B movies promised everyone would be in the future. And even then, I'm sure somebody's silver jumpsuit will have their name in brush script on the side. There will be standard embroidery there. The thing is that long tail decoration, that stuff that's out there in the specialty world, there's often little pockets of highly motivated people who want to buy that stuff. If you can find one of those pockets, it can be very valuable, right? The other thing about it too is this. It's like I've told you guys when I talk about higher level digitizing or specialty techniques. If they trust you with the creative stuff, then they know that you can do the staples. And many people will come to you through seeing something really cool that you've done, through seeing something highly technical, and then say, well, if that person can do that really highly technical thing with all the blending, with the cool 3D foam, with the cool thread, with all those textures, with that interesting applique, they're definitely going to be able to handle my polo shirt with left chest logo. And they're probably going to do a more creative job of my simple work than someone who doesn't stretch themselves beyond the commodity. And because it feels like we care about the work more. And I think that actually plays out. We care about the work more. And that's something that I think is worthwhile. But I did caution everybody some of the realities, and something that actually Justin cautioned people on too. And I'm going to talk about this. One of the things he talked about was the realities of the work, meaning that some of the work that we get into, it gets into art project territory. If you heard me talk about this before, there are times where we start to just donate our work and donate our time because we love the project. Some of the projects that I showed on screen right there, really, if they weren't supported by other work, like this work here with this lovely quilted jacket that honestly my mom helped me work on. She's a seamstress in her earlier career, a sewist. So she helped me figure out the manual quilting on this piece, and I did the rest of the embroidery. So that was a collaboration with me and my mom. But doing this set of pieces that were for the giveaways for this art gallery is part of why we were the choice to do the normal prints and the other stuff. We were creative. We helped them out. And being that, having that attitude of, we can create this incredible piece for your art gallery. Can we also print everything else that you need? Can we also make all of your embroidery? Absolutely, we can. That was part of that parcel. The thing is, if you think about the time spent on this piece back here, yes, it was paid for. Did it make the most sense without the rest of the job? I'd say in this particular case, not really. And some work is like that. The thing you have to be careful with is what your actual outlay is. That's something I actually talked about in the session, is you have to manage your investment into whatever job to understand that something has to come back from it. So I'm not going to say you're not going to do standard embroidery. You're going to do it if you're an embroiderer for any period of time, but it's something worthwhile to think about. But here are the things that I learned, and I'm going to make this the wrap up for the show. I'm not going to go probably an hour and a half. I'm going to try and make this a little shorter than usual. The things that I learned in the show that we did, in the classes that we did in Technique Toolkit, are the following. Number one, challenge your assumptions. Challenge your assumptions. And this is something that I think is worthwhile to think about. Joe had an awesome session that I'm going to show a couple slides. Hopefully he won't mind too bad. I'm going to show his header and one slide so you can kind of see stuff that he's got on his website as well. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about. He helped us to challenge our assumptions about the kind of thread we can use and why. And I really enjoyed kind of seeing that stuff. And I'll just go ahead and put this up as a small box so I don't give up the whole thing. He did the alternative threads piece for the Technique Toolkit, and a portion of that I really enjoyed was this concept of like, hey, you guys are running with polyester, shiny thread, 40 weight. And he also talked about, by the way, text versus weight. I have not learned the text system in my bones the way that he did. He considered it a better way to measure threads than thread weight. We always talk about 40 weight and 6-8 and 12 weight thread. Well, text is another system for measurement. I've discussed it before, but I'll be honest and say it's not in my heart the way it is for Joe, where he understands that stuff. But yeah, absolutely, he kind of has that. He had that concept of text versus weight, but still a good portion is just challenging your assumptions. The assumption is we're going to use the same threads, the same materials, the same stabilizers on everything, and it's the same stuff we've been using. And Joe actually kind of came up upside our heads a little bit and said, hey, not all thread is necessarily to be used like that in the same ways. And sometimes we can use different stuff. And one of the things he was using sewing thread. And that's something I've showed you guys before. If it's made to run at high speeds, if it's made to be used for construction, it can be very similar to embroidery thread. Not all sewing thread is exactly the same. Not all thread for all work is the same. I'll tell you something I did very early on in my career was I tried to use buttonhole thread on an embroidery machine. Let me tell you how stupid that was. Super springy, does not return very well, looked cool, but was hard as hell to run. But standard sewing threads and ones that are made by the same companies that are making our embroidery thread can be used, and they're interesting. It's not that everything should be done with them. It's not that stock designs are made for them. However, if you want to make an interesting texture, there are other threads that are out there that are made by the same companies as ours that are strong enough and work well enough to run that you can run and get different cool textures. I mean, thread is thread to some degree. He also came to us and talked about needles and saying, hey, there are different kind of needles that might change how your hook timing works. And he talked about those needle setups. Like I said, not going to give away the whole farm, but if you want to see more of his stuff, go check out what Joe's doing. Because he talked about the different needle geometries he uses because they're out there and they're available and they're made by the same people who make the stuff that we usually use. So, like I said, not something I would do for every client, but there is a world of expression out there, especially for those of us who are trying to do something a little different or trying to showcase something interesting that's possible. And even though I'm always somebody who says you should start with embroidery materials, and certainly I start with embroidery materials when I'm teaching because they are so well attested to, because we know what they're going to do, we know how they're going to work. And when you're teaching yourself and learning and using stock designs, especially stock design, stock settings, using the materials that those were intended for is going to give you a much higher level of success and a much better ability to understand what you're doing. But those of us who go beyond that point of just doing basic work or doing the kind of work that is most rationally seen in embroidery, which can be very detailed, very out there. Hell, some of the stuff Justin showed at the show, I'll show one of his pieces that really knocked people's socks off. All using very standard embroidery materials, not using any weird threads, and is incredibly detailed and difficult and hard. And some of the pieces I've done are very detailed and difficult and interesting and have texture and have shading and all of that. Without going into the world of new materials, what I'm saying is if you've been there, you know that stuff, you start to learn how the machines work, you learn about density and you learn about pull compensation, you learn about mark making with thread and textures, then we can bring in these materials with our understandings of how the machines work, with our understandings of how fabric works, and do something interesting and do something very cool. So, and I've done this before previously, but yeah, different materials are really cool. Also, we can use applique materials. Applique materials don't really have nearly the effect as the thread does on the way the machine runs, and we can use all kinds of applique materials without causing problems. I've done very weird materials for applique before. So very cool stuff, very interesting stuff. And also, some stuff is out there that's being used in the home world. For those of us who are really dyed-in-the-wool commercial, home embroiderers have been using like woolly thread and nylon threads and all sorts of crazy stuff for years and have ventured into the sewing thread and other kinds of threads and tried them because they're out there experimenting on their own and they're doing it for joy. They're not as worried about production at first. But the thing that was interesting from his point of view, we have to remember Joe worked for Abercrombie and Fitch, developing things that had to be done in factories across the world. This is somebody who has the experience to say that if you get the right kind of sewing thread and you test it and it works well and it works at speed and you understand how to adjust your densities for it, that it works for embroidery. How does he know? Thousands upon thousands, tens upon tens of thousands of pieces embroidered for major companies using sewing thread. So as much as I am always a proponent of starting out with embroidery specific materials, we should at least think that as we get further into this thing, there are other options for materials that work very well. And we shouldn't also not necessarily trash somebody when they venture outside of the standards that we understand, that we know. So challenging your assumption is something. And then of course, the funny version of that is just, yes, Joe, I'll learn the text system of how to name threads. I'm still stuck on weights, my man. I still know 40 weight and 60 weight and 75 weight and 12 weight. I will get to using the text system someday if I can make myself do it. Apparently with doing that kind of commercial construction and other decorators, he's really steeped in that system. And I was like, ugh, man, all right. You got it, man. I'll figure it out. But yeah, he also had some really cool needle kind of recommendations, needle systems or needle geometries that aren't very standard in the embroidery world that he liked to use. And he explained why and how that affected things like machine timing. So really cool, very cool stuff. Absolutely wonderful. And I think that's the thing. I've always advocated everybody take some time to experiment. I think this just takes a little bit further in saying, hey, as long as something is made to run through a machine that is much like your machine, I'm not telling you to go out there and rip the sinew out of an animal leg and then jam it through your needle. sewing thread goes into an interlock machine and is made to be used. The problem we often have with these kind of things like specialty threads or thick threads is that somebody will go out there and grab a stock design that was digitized for the thickness and the relative density of a 40 weight polyester and then throw like a super thick thread at it. And then they get problems with the machine binding up and issues with it. Or they're using small home machines that only can go up to a certain thread thickness before real problems can occur. And I know I've sewn 12 weight on an old PE 800, so I know what it is to use a single needle machine with really thick threads and have it kind of stutter when we get to heavy densities. That's why I think we advise against it as much as we do, especially with people who are learning and first starting out. But it's worthwhile to think about that stuff. Very interesting, and we've seen some people here talking about it too. Really kind of interesting stuff. Barb says, "I wonder how serger thread would run on the embroidery machine it's made for high speed." Well, let me tell you, it runs all right. How can I tell you that it runs all right? Because one of the samples that I just threw up on there and showed you has serger thread in it. I actually used, I believe it was Maxi-Lock serger thread to create this little guy I'm circling up here, this cross stitch that looks kind of fuzzy and nice. I can bring up a better image of it, but some of the cross stitch pieces I did back in the day, I used serger thread because I was in a shop that had an industrial sewing arm. We had sewing and serging in the same building. What I will say is, for me, the serger thread that I used specifically, I thought it was Maxi-Lock. I'm trying to remember the name of it because it's not something I used all the time. It created more lint than I would like. There was lint on the surface, but it was cool and fuzzy. It did create more lint on the machines. I had to clean more often. Anytime I've used any kind of fuzzy thread, whether that's fuzzy embroidery thread like Burmilana, and definitely Burmilana Co., which, by the way, I'll bring that graphic back up. This little faux knit tree that I talked about that I taught the method for during that session, up here in the upper right-hand corner, that faux knit tree was with Burmilana Co. cotton thread, and I'm going to say that is the lintiest thread I've ever put through a machine. Running that cotton, very much had to run slower. There's one you would never put on 2,000 stitches a minute, by the way. Had to run slower, had to back everything off. Tensions were crazy low. And on top of that, that cotton thread, it broke a lot. It made a lot of fuzz. It was constantly requiring me to clean the machines when I played with it. So Burmilana Co., I liked the look a lot. In fact, I really enjoyed the look of it. It was nice and matte. More matte to my eye than the Burmilana with the wool blend. But the wool blend ran way better. And as Ramona says, polycore strongly suggested. Those have polycore. So yeah, polycore thread, very, very much suggested. But I have run it. It's been okay. So I'll just say that. I have run it. I'm not going to say I haven't done some crazy stuff. But yeah, and Scott, you're totally right. A Juki serger can flat out rip. Juki machines do. Like I said, my mom back in the day was a seamstress. So she was around lots of industrial machines. And I have seen people sew at speeds that make me absolutely frightened. Yeah, you can for sure. Specialty threads can be cool. But yeah, some of the, especially industrial sewing threads, they are made to roll at high speeds and they run well. If you use the right needle with the right size eye, if your densities are right in your software. So the other part of this is you do need to have, you have to have this attitude of testing. You have to test densities and you have to understand what the relative thickness of that thread is, which may take some testing. And it is something to be digitized for to a high degree. I wouldn't, yes, can some of them fit where a 40 weight thread can? Yes. I think they're a little fuzzier, a little thicker. And to my experience, when I have used sewing thread in the place of 40 weight thread without changing the design, I felt like the density was always a little too high. And that's from me, not from anybody else. But yeah, absolutely. I would say running sewing thread in the place of embroidery thread. Be careful of thicknesses. This is not me just saying, I've evaluated this and go ahead, use sewing thread, whatever you want to. They're not all made the same. They're not all the same thickness. They will have to be tested for. And best case scenario, you're actually creating for them. Remember, Joe was developing techniques as a digitizer, working with production companies and testing things. And some of those things failed and he had to change those in order to make those processes work. So Joe's stuff was cool, but you have to also understand it required testing and digitizing to do it at the highest level and to make sure it was repeatable. And remember that also those people in the factories he was using were fully willing to adjust settings and materials in order to get those jobs for A&F. So if you just go to your machine, leave it set up in the exact same way, take a stock design to it, use all the same materials, use all the same stabilizers, and just jam a thick thread in it, that's not going to work. You do have to tune for it, but it is still very interesting and a lovely thing. And also, I love people here talking about these different things like Did a patch on 600 denier waterproof canvas, worked okay, I think. Yeah, there's lots of materials work great for canvas. Why do we say polyester twill? Because it works for the most people. It's got a fine grain, and you can hot cut it if you want to. Does it mean poly twill is the only way to do canvas or to do patches? No. One of the reasons I recommend it is because people are often using things like cotton duck, and they're so coarse that fine detail is hard to get because people want a thick, crispy patch. And instead of realizing that it's usually a function of the adhesive or the plastic backing or whatever else you use to fuse it to that makes it thick and kind of crispy like a commercial patch, people try and get really dense, thick materials and then find that they have like binding of the needle. They have stair stepping in their satin stitches. They can't get fine detail because they're on super coarse material and sometimes running ballpoint needles even. So they end up doing kind of jobs that look worse than they have to and struggling with small text on coarse materials. That's why I recommend poly twill, not because it's the only ever thread for or the only ever material for patches. I've used tons of different materials to make patches and appliques. To the point of using crazy material I would never want to embroider on, but it worked well for an applique, especially with a full satin border that was covering the sins of the fringy edges. I've done some crazy. We did like a poncho material, like those really cool kind of figured ponchos you'll see in any given mercado out here. Cut that stuff up. In fact, there's a great guy. Oh God, his name just escaped me, in Arizona, who I always have followed, and he does really cool work where he does that stuff. And I remember he did this a lot of stuff for show trucks, and now suddenly his name just left me. Tons of cool appliques, and he did some stuff like that. He did that poncho material with a plastic covering on it, so it looked very much like old school seat covers. It was cool. You can use lots of stuff. It's just about knowing the nature of the materials. So that's really what I got out of Joe's class, was just like, challenge your assumptions. And of course, hey, text versus weight. And then talking about what I got out of the material too is what we got from Justin. Justin, of course, did awesome 3D foam work. I've already shown you some of the textured 3D foam. I'm showing you some of mine as well. But he did this really great 3D foam work. And I think the one what I love that he said that kind of caught me by surprise a little bit is he showed one of these pieces that everybody loves from Justin, right? Like we've seen all the cool textured logos, the textured lettering, and I think that that stuff is well attested to. It works very well. Love it. Really enjoy a lot of that textured lettering stuff that he's done. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of people are at. The thing is that they see some of these cool things. And I'll show you a couple of these pieces on his Instagram real quick. We'll pop that up because I want to just give Justin some more props. Why not? Hopefully you'll see some of the cool 3D foam. It's flashing, it's going back and forth. All these cool textured pieces, just thick 3D foam. Cool stuff that we have from Justin. And he's done lots of this work. And like I said, some of these things are just absolutely very well suited, and they make very cool designs. And a lot of the things that have texture on the satins, I think, could be completely good for production. It's not something that I would consider unfriendly to production at all. Really cool stuff. But we're seeing all these cool distressed pieces, and a lot of the serpent texture stuff that we've seen. So a lot of that cool kind of textural, the textural fill stuff like that, just cool stuff, and standard embroidery. But I love, like I said, really interesting. This serpentine style textured satin, really cool. But he talked about this piece that everybody really loves from him. They were doing that contest, the embroidery nerd guys doing a contest, and he had this piece, which I love this piece. But this is like a multi-layer foam piece. And when we were talking about it, right, this multi-layer foam piece is super cool. However, the multi-layer foam, he came right out and said very honestly, he's like, hey, the reality of the work with this multi-layer foam piece is that it's a lot of work, and that it's probably not a great idea for everybody because this thing required you to stop and rip foam multiple times to get it done. It's super awesome work. But this is what I would say. I see this work and I trust Justin with any of the 3D foam work I want to do. But he was very candid about saying this is not something I want to do for every customer because it was really hard. He took multiple kinds of, he had different durometers, so different densities of foam, how hard the foam is to squish, and use multiple layers of foam. He had work that was done under the first layer of foam, then a second layer of foam, then a third layer of foam to make this thing happen. And that required removing foam as part of the process and stitching over it. Is the final piece he did not artistic? It's incredible. It is shockingly incredible. Look at this piece. Lovely piece of work. And I think that's the thing. I would love to see work like this. The cool thing that Justin did for all of us, though, is to get up there and say, yep, here's my awesome work. I do textured multi-level 3D foam. It's cool. I love how this stuff looks. But the reality of this thing is you wouldn't put this thing on production for just any client any given day. And the other reality is when you see a lot of work that does look like this with multi-layer foam or foam that goes from the brim all the way to the crown, giant foam treatments with all kinds of extra stuff, that it's done as a panel program, meaning that it's done on flat panels and then the cap is stitched together after the fact, which makes it more stable and easier to handle. And that for most clients on finished caps, this is not a normal production job. And you shouldn't expect that this is probably the most profitable job for a standard average size shop that's running business to business embroidery like most of us do. That was a very refreshing thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. What I want you to know is that there are so many of these textural treatments that Justin did that are run just fine. These textured fill overs with the rough edges, like I said, all the serpentine patterns, the faux chenille foam with the jagged edge outers, and even the split foam stuff like you saw here. And I wish I had just the photo of this one instead of the video. I need to like advance that for you guys. But like these things can run in production and are not like crazy beyond the realm. They're things that I can see, especially standard textured foam, the satin, the textured satins over foam. Any of that stuff is totally, this is viable as a production thing because it's not much different than 3D foam itself. And you could also do this with one color foam, rip that thing down, and it would work. These kinds of textures are very viable, but doing like 3, 4, 5 layer foam on the average job is probably not something you do all the time. So the great thing is Justin was able to flex and flex those muscles, show you these creative options without, frankly, kind of blowing sunshine on you. He wasn't telling people that this isn't difficult or that it's not something that that's something that you would do in production every day for every client at the normal price. He's like, this is a $50 hat. Here's the thing. Even though I am definitely on board and love the fact that he did that, I'm going to tell you this. I have made the $50 hat. Justin's made the $50 hat before. We've had clients who come in and say they want it, and we tell them the price. We give them the what is the nice way to put it is the scare away price. The actual letters are FO that most people say before that price. That's the way that we will do that. I try and keep the friendly tag on all of my podcasts here, but we have the getaway price that we give people. And sometimes somebody looks at that getaway price and says, bet, I want it. I'm good for it. I will pay $50 a hat. Just make that hat. If you have that client, awesome. Go to it, do it. You're going to do a great job that you're going to put on your wall, that you're going to show everybody. The chances are you're going to get more people who want to do single color textured foam or an interesting treatment. However, there are still reasons why that specialty stitching is worthwhile, right? And that's something I taught in my class, talking about direct specialty stitching and textures and things like that. The specialty stitching is worthwhile because not only do you stand out among your peers for being able to do it, and it gives you that trust as being a creative, but your customers frequently now, especially in a world where, and if you watch some of the interviews from Impressions Expo, people were saying we had fashion-driven customers. We had fashion-driven customers. We have fashion-driven blanks now that are more current and interesting and different. Like I said before, talking to the decorators, specialties are here, but the specialties aren't just here because decorators want to do cool stuff. There's always somebody who wants to do a cool project in the decorating space. Specialties are here because clients are looking to stand out, have something cool, and show that work that makes them look like they know where to go, like they are the people to check out for cool options, like they are aligned with something that is more fashion forward or that leans into a culture, leans into a style. For those people, the distinction is major. And I've already told you guys many times when I talk about other kinds of decoration and doing specialty digitizing and what have you, that the delight people feel, the smile they get when they see something that they don't recognize in most other work, that has an interesting detail, that has a texture that looks different, that is more than what they would expect from someone in your field. That little bit, especially when it's something that addresses their brand, their culture, what's important to them, and you show them that the thing that's important to you, that's important to me too. And I noticed it. The culture that you like, the textures you like, the style you like, I noticed it and I put that in there for you. Yo, dog, I hear you like texture on your 3D foam. I got that. Here's 3D foam with texture. Here's something different. Here's something not everybody has, or here's something that you've seen in another place. Here's something you've seen in streetwear. Here's something you've seen in fashion. Here's something you've seen in handcraft. And I brought that to this very commercial process that you expected to be a commodity, and I can do that for you. And there's a lot of value in that. People want to be the person who knows where to get the cool stuff and who shows the cool stuff. Not to mention, a lot of what we do is promotional, even if it's not. This still applies, I think. But a lot of what we do is promotional. It's meant to be seen by an end viewer who's going to associate that brand, that person, that company, whoever's wearing the garment with whatever the decoration is and the style that's there. That association is valuable. And even if we're making this for a person, a individual personalized piece that's just for them to wear is just because they like it, they don't usually wear embroidery to look at it for themselves. They wear embroidery to show something about themselves to other people. So the audience isn't just the people who are going to wear the embroidery or purchase the embroidery. The audience is actually their audience. And if we can give them something that lets them stand out and that lets them be the person who brings that cool thing in and be associated with that interesting, delightful, standout texture or style, we have given them an obvious good, an obvious value. They get to bring that around and have that be part of their presentation to their eventual audience. Whoever that audience is, whether that's like, that could be a family gathering, that could be their customer, that could be anything, that could be their club, that could be the opposing team. They get to bring that to the table because you put it together. And that's why this can be valuable. By no means am I saying, do you go and dirtball your prices, lower it down, and spend the same amount of time and effort to create these masterpieces on someone who's paying you for the left chest logo slap. If they're paying you for the left chest logo slap, that's what you got to give them to some degree. Though I'm going to tell you, some of the stuff I taught was that thread swaps with a fuzzy thread that's got some texture, using a whip stitch. Like in Stitch Artist, we have the whip stitch, which is a multi-pass satin stitch, and changing some densities, using jagged edges or randomness on fills. You can make a logo type style design without changing the digitizing look different, do a quick material swap, and have a really cool looking piece without putting a bunch of effort into it and still get that specialty look. You can use thread that works well in your machines, that doesn't cost you more time to work, do very little change to the digitizing, not redraw a lot of shapes, just use different settings inside the shapes you already drew, and make versions of logos that are pretty different and cool and shockingly not similar to that original style of polyester thread fills and satins with just a few sliders if you know your software right. And if your software has the tools, you can use stock lettering and use enveloping to warp lettering and make it look cool and different, psychedelic, and not have to draw the stuff yourself. But it is still thinking outside of the box. It's still presenting a different look to the client. And certainly when we're talking about like thread and stuff, yeah, maybe there's stocking some different thread or having to purchase it for the job, but we can do things that don't take us a tremendous amount of effort. We can do a quick material swap. We can swap the material in an applique. We can use a printed material instead of a solid color. We can get custom printed material that's not that expensive these days and put that in an applique instead. We can do simple swaps and still get some of the feeling of that distinction and that originality, that creativity, and that delight. With that, I think I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm going to grab the last couple comments from folks and just go ahead and see what you guys had to say. But we'll leave it at that and say that challenging yourself, looking at what's possible, but also being realistic about what has to happen for production. All things that I came away with, and you're going to see more of me doing some of that stuff too, especially like Joe comes by. We're going to have him in. He's already agreed to do an interview. We'll see. Hey, maybe Justin will come on if you want to, Justin. You always can. But we're going to do some interviews, some other stuff as well as part of this stuff. But I think I'm going to bring that forward into my work this year and really try and get more of that feeling of, not, yes, challenging things a little bit, but understanding that the underlying truth is the stuff that I've been teaching you guys all this time, that I've been teaching everybody, that if we understand the thread, the needle, the machine, we understand the nature of embroidery, the stitch angles, the densities, the stitch lengths, the patterns and regularity. If we understand how our software addresses these things and the tools that are available in our software to make this happen, that once we know these basics, we can plug and play different variables, different materials into this and get new and interesting ways to make marks, to cover things up, to create designs, to create texture that can bring more value to our work. And I think it's really valuable for all of us. But last couple comments, and then we'll get going here. Love seeing that stuff. So thank you guys for jumping in. Ron saying, watching mom work on her old chenille machine, mesmerizing. Yeah, hand-guided chain stitch and chenille is also around. Boy, go check out any of the social media platforms. Check out Instagram, check out TikTok, and look for people doing hand-guided chain stitch. Beautiful stuff. I repost some of that stuff on my own. I don't do active TikToks of my own just yet, but I have gotten on there and reposted some of those to show people because, man, hand-guided embroidery work is beautiful stuff to watch. Something I love to do. And then we got a couple more here. New techniques were amazing. The foam layering, the DTG on embroidery is so impressive. Yeah, very cool stuff. And love to see people doing mixing multimedia with digital print, with even with doing things like printing on HTV, heat transfer vinyl, or printing on other materials and layering that into appliques. Very easy way to get some cool value. People saying goodbye to each other. Love that. Have a great weekend, folks. Cindy said, I thought it was interesting that the Brother Home Machines had a booth. Yeah, that's true. At Long Beach, there's a crossover. Home Embroidery does interesting stuff. Absolutely. And frankly, the third bedroom business is a business. I've been fighting forever to tell you guys that the third bedroom business, the two machines in someone's third bedroom or garage, that is a business. And a lot of people in those businesses are doing that long tail decoration. Maybe it's not like big multi-head master production, but they're doing business where each piece is worth more because it's boutique and because it's specific to their niche. And those third bedroom businesses are coming around getting more money per stitch than a lot of us do in the like I said, in that zone of doing kind of that commodity work. And we should not ignore those folks, right? They're part of this. And we're all going to be good stewards of the machine embroidery world. And we should understand that they belong here at the table. Thanks for being there for the show. Have a great weekend, folks. Glad you got to catch us live, Cloud Nymphs. If not, jump in, get on that YouTube channel, get all the previous ones or whatever's over there on Twitch. But thank you for being here as well. Curtis, thank you for being here as well. Have a good one. A good one, Ron. Have a good one, Barb. And with that, let's let that be the take up for this week. Go out there, experiment, try something new. Do it carefully, sure. Do it with the knowledge that you've built up. But from that foundation, go do something cool. Go do something new. See what's out there that tickles your fancy, and let yourself have some time to play and make something great. Even if it's not the thing you do every day, it'll help people trust you with the things that you will. All right, folks. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to do it again next week.